the topic that I'd like to deal with is, why don't Ashkenazim in Israel always pasken like the Rama? As you know, we have a code of Jewish law called the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rav Yosef Karo, who was a Sephardi. He lived in Tzfat. And I'm not going into the whole history. The Rama wrote glosses on the Shulchan Aruch every time the Ashkenazic minhag was against what Rav Yosef Karo wrote. And there's many examples of it. The best example is, of course, Pesach. The Shulchan Aruch quotes directly from the Gemara that says you can eat all the kitniyot on Pesach, including rice.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
I have a very good story on that.
Yes.
My husband was from Panama.
Yeah.
And the first year that I went there for Pesach,
Mm-hmm.
he said, we're going to a very religious home, but they're going to have rice. And I was brought up in Chicago, which is completely Ashkenaz at that time. And I said, they're not only not observing the law, they're probably not even Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. And I think your example brings out exactly what this year is all about. And that is that when you came from America or other Ashkenazic predominant communities, rice is considered not Pesachdik. In other words, we do not have rice on Pesach. If you have rice on Pesach, you're probably not a religious Jew, maybe not Jewish at all. So that's one of the many examples where the Shulchan Aruch says you can have rice on Pesach, and indeed in the Gemara we do pasken that way, and the Rama says that's not the Ashkenazic minhag. And I would say that for 80% of what the Rama paskens, we Ashkenazim in Israel follow. We don't eat kitniot, as one of the many examples. We don't start slichot at Rosh Chodesh Elul, and there's many other examples I can give. However, I can't go ahead and ignore the other 20%. And the 20% is not only a viable minority, it's a visible minority. And let's start right with a halacha that we all fulfilled on the night of Pesach, on the Seder night. We just started, so you're right on time. So on the Seder night, when we started this beautiful yontiv after the Shabbos prior, as you all recall, we davened Ma'ariv in shul, and after Ma'ariv, we said Hallel in shul with a bracha. And indeed, the Shulchan Aruch, again, Rav Yosef Karo, writing this in Tzfat as a Sephardi, says, Belel Rishon Shel Pesach, on the first night of Pesach, Gomin HaHalel B'tzibur B'ni'ima, you should say Hallel with great song in the congregation, Bi bracha, with a bracha, Tchila Vasof. Obviously, he's writing that because at the Seder, we don't say a bracha on Hallel, beginning and end. Right? Comes along the Rama, on that place, writing the glosses of the Ashkenazim. So the Rama's in Krakow around the same time. We're talking about the 17th century. And he says, we don't do this. We say Hallel by the Seder, obviously, but we don't say Hallel in shul on the first night of Pesach. You can go to any Ashkenazic shul in Israel. I believe every single shul in Israel said Hallel with a bracha. There may be an exception or two, but I've davened in many shuls in Israel, and I can promise you that is the predominant minhag. If that doesn't convince you, let's go to the second example on the page. The second example on the page, I have to admit halachically, is even more problematic than the first one. Because the first one is not even a source in the Gemara. It's in what's called Masechet Sofrim, which is a quasi source from our sages. But this is a biblical commandment from the Torah, and for some reason it's not done outside of Israel in Ashkenazic communities. And what am I talking about? Duchening every day. I didn't even bring the source here regarding the Shulchan Aruch saying duchen every day, because he doesn't say it. He starts the laws of duchening with the laws of duchening, assuming you're going to duchen every day, because that's what it says in the Torah. It doesn't say in the Torah duchen on Yontif. It says, Kol tevachu et b'nei Yisrael emor lahem. Bless the Jewish people, and every time the Torah says something without a time, it's once a day, every day. So if that's the case, of course it's a biblical commandment. Came along the Rama and said something amazing. Nohagim b'chol medinot elu. I'm living in Ashkenazic communities. In all the Ashkenazic communities, he says, she'ein nosim kapayim ela b'yom tov. You only duchen on Yontif. You all remember this from England. You remember this perhaps from America. You only duchen on Yontif. They made a big deal out of it because it was only 13 times a year. Sha'ah shvuyim b'simchas Yom Tov v'tov levu yivarech. The Rama assumes that you can only duchen if you're happy. And a Jew's not happy except for on Yontif. So two assumptions. You have to be happy to duchen, and you're only happy on Yontif. What about Shabbos? Masha Ein Kain, Bishar Yamim. There during the week you're definitely not happy. Ve'afilu b'Shabbatot Hashana, and even on Shabbos, Shetrudim behirurim amichyatam v'bitul melachtam. Shabbos, there's one day in the middle of the week. So Friday I'm working, Sunday I'm working. I'm not happy enough. Right? So they once asked the late chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Avram Shapiro, what about us in Israel? How come on Shabbos we duchen? Maybe we're also worried about work that we're missing over Shabbos. He says it can't be. In Israel, no one really works. But to make a long story short, comes along the Rama and says we're only happy on Yantiv. Va'afilu b'Yom Tov, and even on Yantiv, says the Rama, ein nosim kapay mila b'tfilat musaf. You only duchen at Musaf. Why? Because at Musaf you're at the happiest. Why are you at the happiest on Musaf? So you're happy only on Yantiv. Let's go through this again. You have to be happy to duchen. You're only happy on Yantiv. And you're at the happiest of the happy at Musaf. Why? Don't look for any lofty reason.
Because shul's almost over.
There you go. Shiyatzivas bin Beit HaKnesset. V'yismechu b'simchas Yantiv. Because shul's almost over. People are going to go home to eat the brisket. That's when they're happy. Custom number 2 that we don't follow in Israel. Almost every Ashkenazi community duchens every single day. And if they don't, they duchen on Shabbos. They do not follow this Rama. Difference number 3. Difference number 3 has to do with a married man versus a non-married man duchening. In that same Rama that I just quoted, the Rama says you have to be happy to duchen. So he makes 2 assumptions. Assumption number 1, you're only happy on Yontif. Assumption number 2, if you're not married, you're not happy. Kohen, afal pi shehu panui noseh kapav, says the Shulchan Aruch. Even a single Kohen, 13 years old, goes up to duchen. Says the Rama, v'yesh omrim, and some say there ain't no noseh kapav, that he does not duchen. Why? The hasharui below isha, sharui below simcha. If you are without a wife, you are not happy. And therefore, says the Rama, once again, based on his point of view, and someone that blesses the Jewish people has to be happy. So we already found 3 examples, Mr. Fax, that we don't follow the Rama even though we're Ashkenazim in Israel. So we're all not eating kitniot, as the Rama says, but there are 3 examples we already found in which we do not follow the Rama. Number 1, we say Hallel on the night of Pesach in Shul with a bracha. Number 2, we duchen every day. And number 3, even a single man duchens. Now we'll get to a number 4. In the Siddur, it says that if there's no Kohen, say a Chachris, you're supposed to say a little piyut that starts with the words Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu, Barchenu b'bracha ha'meshuleshet b'Torah. Please bless us with the 3-pronged bracha in the Torah. And we say Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. And usually instead of saying Amen, we say Ken Yehi Ratzon. Right? Everybody knows that. What happens when you are in shul with a Kohen? Around Israel, we just don't say that. Now you have to call the Kohanim to tell them to duchen. So if there's at least 2 Kohanim there, the Gabbai usually says Kohanim. Right? That is not the custom of the Rama. The custom of the Rama, as you can see here, is V'lo yomar Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avotenu, when there is duchening going on. V'yesh omrim, but some say sha'omer oto belachash. The Chazan says under his breath, Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avotenu, Barchenu b'bracha mishuleshet, Shabbat Torah ha'ktuvah yidei Moshe avdecha, ha'amuar mepei Aaron v'banav, and then he screams out Kohanim, and then again under his breath he says Am kedoshecha kahamur, and then he adds V'chein nohagim b'medinot elu. And this is the custom of the Ashkenazim. Is this the custom of the Ashkenazim in Israel? 100,000%, with the exception of Chabad. I don't believe anyone does this. Example number 4. Example number 5 comes to another halacha that we just started to do here in Israel. And we started on Sunday morning. So we started this year with Saturday night, with Hallel. Now we're going to Sunday morning. So we daven Shachris and then we daven Musaf. At Musaf we said Tfilatal and we started to say Morid Hatal. And since then, I believe everyone who davened have said Morid Hatal in their private Amidas, correct? Comes along the Rama and says, when When the Rama brings what happens if you forget and you say the wrong thing, he says in the summer months, namely from Pesach till Shmini Atzeret, when we don't say Morid Atal, what do we say, says the Rama? Nothing. Ata gibor l'olam Hashem. L'chayim eitim ata. Rab lo Hoshia, nothing. L'chalkel chayim b'chesed. Now, I'll just tell you that Morid Atal is actually a good bet. Do you know why? Because if during the months between Shmini Atzeret and Pesach, you said Morid Atal in place of Mashiva Ruach or Morid Geshem, it's good enough. You don't have to repeat your Shmona Esrei. So it's always good to say Morid Atal. It's just a good piece of advice. But according to the Rama, if you said Mashiva Ruach or Morid Geshem, now you'd have to go back, like we would. So Morid Atal does save us. But the Rama says not to say it. In every single siddur that I've checked that is printed in Israel, Rinat Yisrael, Koren, etc., it says to say Morid Atal. If it's a siddur for Chutz La'aretz, sometimes they write, some people don't say it. So we're seeing, if you see one example that we don't follow the Rama, you can go to sleep at night. You see two examples, you can also maybe say, maybe you made a mistake. You see four examples, you're beginning to see that there's maybe an agenda here. And we're going to try to find the agenda. Yes, Rita?
In the art scroll, it only has Mashiach Ruach.
In the art scroll, indeed, they follow the Rama as they do in Chutz La'aretz. Example number 5, yes?
Yeah, sorry, I came in late and I missed a very
No
fundamental
problem.
point.
Yes.
I can't get it, I can't hang on any longer. Who was the Rama?
I'm sorry. The Rama was Rav Moshe Isserlish. He lived in the 16th century in Krakow. He wrote the glosses on the Code of Jewish Law, putting in the Ashkenazic minhag every time the Code of Jewish Law, Rav Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, went and deterred away from the Ashkenazic minhag. So, for example, when the Shulchan Aruch says to eat kitniot on Pesach, the Rama says not to. Okay, that was the Rama. He is the primary posek of Ashkenazim. 80% of the time we follow what he says. All of a sudden, we found 5 examples that we don't in Israel, even though we're Ashkenazim. Now comes example number 6. At every siddur in Israel that I've checked, it says that in the morning, during the week, you say Aleinu, Shir Shel Yom, and Ein Kelokenu. Ein Kelokenu includes, as you know, Bitum HaKtoret, the Ktoret sacrifice, which had 11 ingredients that they brought in the Beis HaMikdash every morning and evening. Comes along the Rama and says, you should say it. Esh lomar Bitum HaKtoret, ever bokachar tefillah, v'omim tchila Ein Kelokenu. That's what we do on Shabbos, right? Some people are very careful to use a siddur. Because even though many of us know it Baal Peh, what are the 11 ingredients? Hatzari, v'hatzipora, and v'achilbena, v'alevona, mishkal shevim shevim maneh. I can go on. It's better to use a siddur. Why? Because today we don't have sacrifices, so our words, our verbal recitation, is in place of the sacrificial work. As such, chayshinan, we're worried, shema yidaleg echad me'asem emanim. Maybe we're going to forget one of the 11. And what happens if you forget one of the 11? It says there, ve'im chisar echad mikol sememaneh, and you forgot one of the 11, chayav mitah. You're obligated in death, no good. Therefore comes the Rama with a chiddush. Because it's so severe to forget one of the 11, even though we're just saying it, we're not sacrificing it, comes along the Rama and says, V'lachein nahagu, and therefore we have a minhag, shelo lo omro b'chol. We don't say it during the week. Why? Shememaharim lemelachtan, v'chayshinan shema yedaleg. On Shabbos, people stay, as you all know. On Shabbos, we stay in shul, and we go to Kiddush, so you could say it on Shabbos and Yontiv. But during the week, you get to Aleinu after shul walks out. If you have enough people for the second Kaddish after Shir Shel Yom, you're lucky, right? So says the Rama, we don't say it during the week because we're worried people are so quick. Either they'll say it and they'll forget one of the 11, or they won't say it, so we said, forget about it. Let's not say it during the week. In many siddurs outside of Israel, you will not find it in the siddur during the week, only on Shabbos and Yontiv. We don't follow that in Israel either. In Israel, every siddur we say Ein Kelokenu. Yes?
In what volume did he write all this?
Every volume of the Shulchan Aruch, which is divided into 4, the Rama wrote glosses on.
Right.
So therefore the Shulchan Aruch was so accepted by the Jewish people because it's complete. It has the Ashkenazic custom, as does the Sephardic custom. And that's why it's such a accepted book, because it has it all in one book and very succinct.
Right. Who was the other author?
Rabbi Yosef Karo. He was the Sephardic author. He wrote it, and then the Rama added glosses. If you turn the page, you'll see another wonderful thing that no one does in Israel. You may remember this from outside of Israel. That Friday night in shul, you'd make kiddush. Who would you give it to drink?
Kids.
A kid. Because in general, we're not supposed to make kiddush except in a place we eat. En kiddush ela b'makom se'uda. Now, the problem is we're not eating in shul. Once upon a time, they did eat in shul. There were many guests. They didn't have a hotel. They ate in shul. So they made kiddush, aleinu. Those that had a home went home. And those that didn't have a home washed their hands and ate. But we're not living in that situation today. So the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, brings like 4 opinions about this. The Rama on this issue doesn't comment. He doesn't comment. All the Shulchan Aruch says is that if you're going to fulfill this custom, even though the reason's not relevant anymore, then give a kid to drink it, because you really shouldn't be drinking the wine unless you're eating in shul. The Rama only says, "V'nahagu la'amod b'shashem mekachim b'veit hakneset." The only thing the Rama says on this kiddush thing is that you're supposed to stand up. The one that says the Ashkenazim will make kiddush is the Mishnah Bura. Who was the Mishnah Bura? The Chafetz Chaim, if you heard the name, from Radin. He died in 1933. He made it to the 20th century. He wrote a super interpretation on the Code of Jewish Law, and he writes, and I quote his word in the 3rd paragraph, "Umemedinatenu," and in our particular communities, "Nohagim lekadesh bebeit hakneset b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov." We indeed have the custom to make kiddush, except for the first nights of Pesach, because it's one of the 4 cups of wine. That's the only time you don't make kiddush in shul. I'll add to this, just in parentheses, many shuls have added to that, you don't make kiddush on the nights of Sukkot. Why? Because you're supposed to make kiddush in the sukkah. Because maybe wine is like a seuda. In the old time, at least in the time of the Chafetz Chaim, they didn't know from that chumrah. Okay? Nowadays, I've already heard a new chumrah. We shouldn't make kiddush in shul at all during Yantiv, because we'll get mixed up. So Yantiv, no kiddush in shul. Okay. Then I heard a new chumrah. Because of COVID and the germs or whatever, they stopped making kiddush in shul. But to make a long story short, for generations, if you remember America and England and many other places, to this day, they make kiddush in shul as per the Mishnah Bura. So this is not the Rama, this is the Mishnah Bura. But you should know, it's an Ashkenazic minhag that the Mishnah Bura says everybody does. And we don't follow it here in Israel. So I want to understand why. Why is it that we found so many examples of things in which we're Ashkenazim, we generally follow the Rama, and all of a sudden on about 6 examples that I've given, from duchening all the way through kiddush and shul, we do not follow the Rama. Yes?
But isn't Israel a Sephardic country?
No. One of the interpretations to this is that Israel is a Sephardic country. In other words, when Ashkenazim started to come to Israel, we're talking about the students of the Gra, 17 whatever or 18 whatever, all they found here was Sephardic communities. So they blended into the Sephardic community and they became Sephardim. Now that is just historically incorrect, because they made Ashkenazic shuls. They davened Nusach Ashkenaz. They followed the Rama on Kitniot. So that particular idea, which is, I have to say, many have said, is just historically not correct, because we remained Ashkenazim and everything else. In other words, we did not start saying Slichos on Rosh Chodesh Elul like the Sephardim. We did not eradicate the 9 days. Sephardim only do Shavua, Shechal, Bo Tisha B'Av. They only have restrictions during the week in which Tisha B'Av happens to fall out. So we didn't do all of that. So we remained Ashkenazim, and yet we looked like we picked and chose a little bit. So what's the explanation? What happened over here? I'm going to suggest something. You may accept it or not accept it, but it comes down to a very problematic thing that goes on a Friday night. So in order to explain why it's problematic, let's go back a step. The Gemara in Pesachim, Masechet Pesachim is about Pesach, and because you're already talking about Pesach, you talk about the brachot we make at the Seder, and because you're already talking about the brachot you make at the Seder, it gives you rules and regulations of how to make brachot. And one of the rules and regulations of making brachot before a mitzvah, be it lighting the Hanukkah candles, be it reading the Megillah, be it eating matzah, or any mitzvah we do, is Kol HaMitzvot Mevarech Alehen Over LaAsiyatan. Every mitzvah, says the Gemara in Pesachim, page 7b, you make the bracha prior to doing the mitzvah. Are there exceptions to that rule? Yes. What is the most notable exception? Wait, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
That's the problematic one, but I have to introduce it. There's another one.
Okay.
Have you eaten matzah during Pesach? Did you wash your hands?
Yes.
When did you make the bracha?
When I sat down.
Did you make the bracha before you washed your hands or after you washed your hands? After. So there's exception number one. Why do we make the bracha after? Because maybe our hands are dirty and we shouldn't make a bracha. So we wash our hands, now they're pure, then we make the bracha. But many poskim say that's okay. You know why? Because part of making netilat yadayim is to dry your hands. So you haven't finished the mitzvah yet, you still have to dry them. So the proper way to do it is to wash, make the bracha, and dry. Okay, exception number one. Exception number two is, no one in this room is a convert? Okay. If you've been to a conversion, the end of the conversion process is a woman or a man goes into the mikveh. Now they are not going into the mikveh voluntarily, but when they go in, they're a non-Jew, and when they come out, they're a Jew. So they have a little technical problem. They cannot make the bracha going in. You know why? Because they're not Jewish. If they're going to say, God, you have commanded me in your mitzvot and sanctify, that's not true. So they have to make the bracha after they come out of the mikveh. Fine, that's exception number two. Right? But outside of those two exceptions, the Rambam, when he writes his code of Jewish law, Maimonides, comes along and says, Kol ha-brachot kulam, all the brachot, lo yafsik ben ha-bracha, uben ha-badavar shemevarchim alav b'dvarim achirim. All the brachot, outside of the two exceptions I mentioned, when you make the bracha, you go ahead and you cannot have any hefsek, any interruption between making the bracha and doing the thing. So, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, you eat. And just in case you think this doesn't apply to mitzvot, the next Rambam says, Keshem shemarvechim ala anaya. You say hamotzi and eat, you don't talk. Kach, same way. Mevarchim al kol mitzvah mitzvah, v'achar kach yaseh ota. First make the bracha, then do the mitzvah. So we made the bracha on the Hanukkah candles, then we lit the Hanukkah candles. We made the bracha on matzah, then we ate the matzah. You made the bracha on the lulav, then you shake the lulav. You made the bracha on the shofar, then you blew the shofar, right? He doesn't say here anything about candle lighting Friday night, correct? So where does the candle lighting king come in? So we get to the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo. So here he is, he's sitting in 15-something in Tzvat, and he finds a bahag. Now the bahag, Baal halachot gdolot, I already introduced this in one of my shiurim, is someone that says many sensational things. We usually don't paskin like him, but we, as the saying goes, tolerate him. One of the greatest examples is Sfirat HaOmer. During Sfirat HaOmer, the Bahag says if you miss a night of Sfira, it's all finished. There's no use counting again. We don't paskin that way. We paskin you should continue counting, but out of reverence to the Bahag without a bracha. Okay, the Bahag has many of those sensational points of view around the various places. I'll give you another one, Megillah. He has a very strange point of view. The Gemara says explicitly women are obligated to hear Megillah because they're part of the miracle. Maybe it's because of them the miracle happened. Esther is the big woman that we have to thank for this miracle. Comes along the Bahag and says, well, the obligation of men and women are different. Men are obligated in Kriyat HaMegillah, reading the Megillah, and women are obligated in Shmiyat HaMegillah, hearing the Megillah. And they even make a different bracha. If they're reading to themselves, they make Lishma Megillah, or Shmiyat Megillah. Very strange point of view. So now we come to strange point of view number 3. La Bahag, and I'll tell you why this is so strange. Right side of the page. Kevan she'idlik ner shel Shabbat, chal alav Shabbat, v'ne'esar b'melacha. Once you say the bracha lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, you can't light the candles. Now, why is this so strange? Because it's the catch-22 over here.
Yeah.
It's like the sages tricked you. They said, light the Shabbos candles, make a bracha, but you'll never get to lighting the candles because you're going to make a bracha.
That's right.
Wow. And therefore, he says, in order to override this problem, al pizeh, nohagot ktsat nashim, some women, now this is the Shulchan Aruch, he's saying, some women, sha'achar shebirchu, after they make the bracha, ve'hitliku anerot, after they make the bracha, and they light the candles, they mashlichot la'eretz haptila shebiyadan, she'hitliku ba ve'en mechabot ota. And indeed, they can't go ahead and extinguish the match, so they just put it down. They wait for it to extinguish on their own. So he didn't yet talk about the thing like this, but he's getting close to it. And some say, and some say that even if you want to go like the Bahag, if a woman says, I'm not accepting Shabbos, then she can light candles normally. Make the bracha and light the candles like Hanukkah. And some say it doesn't work. Opinion number one. Opinion number two in the middle. That if indeed she makes that condition, it works. So according to the Bahag, you have two choices. You either don't make a bracha and light the candles every Friday night without a bracha. That doesn't sound normal, because why would the sages enact the bracha you would make every single Friday night? Catch 22, Murphy's Law. When you make the bracha, you can't light the candles. So that's for the whole bracha is a bracha levatala. It's no longer a bracha, it's a bracha in vain, because you can't light the candles afterwards. It's like they tricked you. On this comes along the Rama with a great idea. V'aminhag, this is our custom. Shoto isha madleket, mikaberet Shabbat bahadlaka. Indeed, a woman accepts Shabbos when she lights the candles. And what do? I brought the 3 dots here, but all the interpretations talk about it. We have a little trick. Remember I said about the Netilat Yadayim? You wash your hands, then you make the bracha, but you haven't finished the mitzvah yet because you didn't dry your hands. Now let's take that same idea, if we can, and go back a step, okay? Same idea, go back a step. You light the candles, you cover your eyes, you make the bracha, you uncover your eyes. When you uncover your eyes, I am now getting benefit from the candles. That's the one little tiny thing I didn't do before. So it's just like the washing the hand thing, but it's a little different than washing the hand thing. Why is it a little different? Because washing the hands thing, you haven't completed the mitzvah. Here, basically the mitzvah is complete. The only thing is you didn't get enjoyment from the candles. You can get enjoyment from the candles on Shabbos itself, 10 hours later. But still, we found a little trick. We light the candles, we cover our eyes, we say the bracha, then we go, ooh, there's candles here. So it's a little like we just lit them. That's the trick. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't like it. Look on the left side of the page. V'yesh cholkim al ba'al halachot gedolot v'omrim she'en kabbalat Shabbat aloi b'adlakat haner ela b'tfilat arvit. Men and women accept Shabbos when the Chazan says Baruch Hu, or when the time on the calendar says it's time to accept Shabbos. When is that? The cutoff time is not 18 minutes before or 40 minutes before, as it is in Yerushalayim, but rather Shkia, sunset. By sunset, all bets are off. Right? So, based on that, says the Shulchan Aruch, you accept Shabbos when you accept Shabbos. Whenever your congregation accepts Shabbos, you accept Shabbos. At Baruch Hu, you got plenty of time. Right? Unless Baruch Hu happens after Shkia, you got plenty of time. But if you do an early Shabbos, say, it would be Baruch Hu. Therefore, Ledidan, for us, he says, by me in Tzvat, Mizmor Shil Yom HaShabbat, which is a little earlier than Baruch Hu Friday night, that's the time we accept Shabbos. Fine. So people that follow the Shulchan Aruch, and amongst them, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef made a crusade out of this, basically said, you should light candles for Shabbos as you do for Hanukkah. Namely, make the bracha and light the candles. For sure, a man lighting candles should do that, because this whole thing, according to the Rama, is only for a woman. So we only accepted the Bahag for women. Women, I would say, they basically follow this on Yom Tov, maybe, and maybe not. Now this is already politically incorrect, but I will tell you the Yom Tov thing. The Yom Tov thing is no problem, because the whole problem here is, when you make the bracha, you accept the Shabbos. On Shabbos, you can't light a candle. What about on Yom Tov, a weekday Yom Tov? You can light a candle. Why?
But you have to take it from some.
Right, you have to transfer fire. But there's no problem to make a bracha and say, Lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov, even accept Yom Tov, and light a candle. So therefore, on Yom Tov, the mother of the Prisha and the Drisha, who wrote a super commentary on the Torah, the mother, had this great chiddush that this whole thing is only on Shabbos and not on Yom Tov. And he printed it in her name. And many poskim said, she's right. She's right. We're not even happy with the Shabbos thing. But Yontif, for sure, she's right. But there were exceptions to the rule. And one of them was the Magen Avraham. Rav Abraham Grumbeimer, who lived in the generation after the Shulchan Aruch. So we're talking about a century later, when all the interpretations on the Shulchan Aruch were written. And the Magen Avraham comes along and says, you should light candles on Yontif like you do on Shabbos, because, and I'm quoting his words, it's not my words, don't kill me, Ein chokhmah la'isha, a woman has absolutely no brains, ela bapelech, she only knows how to sew. We don't listen to the mother of the Drisha and the Prisha when she comes with Chidushei Halacha to the base medrash. We throw the women out head first and say, keep out. Now, because of that Magen Avraham, there are women that basically light Yontif candles like they do the Shabbos candles. And there are women that say, no, Yontif candles is different than Shabbos candles. But suffice it to say, why am I telling you all of this? Because no one was really happy with this idea of making a bracha after you do a mitzvah. That's not the way we normatively do things. Because of which, we try to minimize it. So we said only Shabbos and not Yontif. And then I came across the following. So as I said, Rav Ovadia Yosef, everybody knew, Shas party, Rav Ovadia Yosef, he was a great posek, one of the greatest, I think, in generations. He came along in his responsum and brings the following story. V'hi'idu li magidei emet, people that talk the truth, meaning not liars. They came to me and they told me, Shekein pasak ha'gaon Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer livnei beito lemishpachto. Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer was the Rosh Yeshiva in Slutsk. He eventually, Slutsk, moved to Kletsk. He made Aliyah to Israel. His son-in-law took over for him. You probably know the name, Rav Aaron Kotler, who eventually made it to Lakewood. So Slutsk went to Kletsk and then to Lakewood. Okay? Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer, his father-in-law, came to Yerushalayim. He came to Rosh Yeshiva of Eitz Chaim Yeshiva, which is next to Machane Yehuda. And someone told Rav Ovadia that this Ashkenazi, Lithuanian, great rabbi Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer, Pasken, when he came to Israel, Levarech kodem adlaka be'erev Shabbat. Even though he was an Ashkenazi, he told his wife, make the bracha first.
Livnei Besa.
Livnei Besa.
That's not necessarily.
He didn't tell everyone else.
Community.
He told his house. Now, this is very personal for me because my Rebbe is Rav Yehuda Amital Zecher Tzadik Levracha. He was a grandson-in-law of Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer. He married his granddaughter. When he used to talk about Asaba, he talked about Rav Issa Zalman. So this is already very personal. B'nai Beita would mean my Rebbe. I never asked him this question. I should have asked him. I didn't know this when he was alive. In any case, he writes, Harei af migdolei rabbanei Ashkenaz Ashkenazim natu kav zeh midat harama lalechet acharei haraot gdolei poskim umaran. So we see that sometimes even Ashkenazim don't go like the Rama. So I would like to propose the following theory. In Israel, 80% of the time we follow the Rama. The 20% that we don't, from duchening onwards, is because we never liked it in the first place. Just like candlelighting is extremely strange. Why would they make a bracha in which you can't do anything with? They made a bracha, you accept the Shabbos, now the bracha stays in the air, and you can't do anything. Every Friday night, you do an Aveira. You make a bracha, and you can't do the mitzvah. It can't be! So there were many things in Lithuania and Poland and Russia and Eastern Europe where they didn't like it there. But it was the minhag for generations, they just continued it. But once they came to Israel, and they're already forming a new community, they decided, hey, let's pick and choose a little bit. And they first started with duchening, because the whole duchening thing is a mitzvah d'oraisa, it's a biblical commandment, and we just don't do it outside of Israel. 365 days a year minus 13, we don't do it. Then there's communities that don't duchen. If a Shabbos comes out on a Yontif, so it comes out to 12. And you can go on and on and on. So one of the many examples is duchening, not saying Morid Atal. Kiddush and Shul Friday night when people are not eating there is very problematic. Not to mention the fact only a married Kohen should duchen. All these things we never liked anyway. We all thought it was strange way back when. But since it was established communities from generations to generations, and excuse me for using the expression of a gabbai in Antwerp, but I'll say it in his name, the Torah didn't start in 1948. So they continued their traditions. But once they came to Israel and they're forming new communities, they said, we will not form the community with the minhagim that we never liked anyway. And therefore, they took out, for example, duchening every day, Kiddush Friday night, because it makes sense to duchen every day, and it makes sense not to make Kiddush in shul if no one's eating there.
When we got Matan Torah, were we Sephardic or Ashkenazic?
That whole division, I believe, was not Sephardic Ashkenazic at the time. It was a division in how to interpret Jewish law between rabbis. As time went on, rabbis were deported from Israel. Some went to Ashkenaz, some went to Sfarad, some went to Provence. And that's when we started to say Ashkenaz Sfarad. But I think the machlokeses were always there. The difference of opinions were always there. It's just that it didn't divide over geographic lines. They were all living in Israel.
That's what I'm saying, that Minhat Torah, wouldn't it be Sfarad because we were in Israel?
No. It could very well be that in Israel there was a yeshiva where some people thought like what Ashkenazic poskim think like, and others thought like Sephardim. Kitnion is a great example. In the Gemara, the majority view is you can eat rice because the fermentation of rice is not fermentation of chametz. And there's one point of view of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri who says, no, it's chametz. So some rabbis liked him, and most rabbis didn't. And as time went on, it divided between Ashkenaz and Sfard. But it didn't start like that. It all started in Israel.
What
Now,
about in the military?
what about in the military?
What do they do?
Everyone follows their own custom. Rabbi Goren tried to make one custom for the military, and he failed miserably. He tried to make one siddur for the military, and that failed miserably. The only thing I can tell you about the military is every time a chazan gets up, you never know which nusach he's going to daven.
Right.
And I say this from experience. How do I know I'm correct? Because outside of Israel, in Lithuania, in Russia, in Poland, in Germany, there were attempts to eradicate the duchening thing time and time again. The Netziv says, and the Aruch HaShulchan says exactly the same thing, that he remembers something about the duchening. There's a story that goes from generation to generation, and it starts with the Gra. Have you heard of the Gra? HaGaon Rabbi Eliyahu Vilna. So he was sitting there in the 18th century in Vilna, and he couldn't stand that they don't duchen every day. He says, I learned the Torah, it says to duchen every day. I don't understand this, Rama, you got to be happy to duchen. So you won't be happy and you'll duchen. You put on tefillin when you're not happy, so you won't be happy. So he decided, that's it. Tomorrow we're going to duchen. And what happened? Ikvuhu min hashamayim v'nilkach lebeit ha'asurim be'et ha'machloket ha'nora'ah bevilna. He doesn't write what the machlokes is, I'm going to guess, because he was at heads with the Hasidim. Unfortunately, Hasidim Lithuanians mastered to the government that, unfortunately, about the other. So he was taken to jail the day he wanted to start duchening in Chutz La'aretz. So he wasn't taken to jail because he wanted to duchen, but because of something else. Ikvuhu min hashamayim. From heaven, they stopped it. So there goes that idea for a few good decades. Next, Achar kach, afterwards, Hagaon Abir Ro'im Moreno Rav Chaim Zal, the student of the Gra named Rav Chaim Volozhin, who founded the Volozhin Yeshiva in 1801, that was closed in 1892, he decided, it's my turn. And he said, we're going to duchen tomorrow. That's it. Enough with this Rama thing. And during that night, when he said, duchen tomorrow, that night, Nisraf Chatzi Ha'ir, half the city had a fire, and amongst the places that went up in fire, Beit HaKnesset Ba'ir. No shul. He decided, it must be a siman from Shemayim, we shouldn't duchen. No more. The Aruch HaShulchan, who made it to the 20th century, Rav Epstein, Rav Yechiel Michael Epstein, who was the rabbi in Norvadik, comes along and says that Inei Vadai Ein Shum Tam Nachon Leminhagenu. There is absolutely no justification for our custom Levatel Mitzvat Aseh, to totally forget about a biblical commandment, a positive biblical commandment, the Birkat Kohanim Kol HaShana Kula, to duchen every single day. There is no reason for it, he says. He doesn't say there's a reason, no good reason. Throughout the generations, you can well imagine, many reasons were given. He doesn't like any of them. Not only is it no reason, it's a terrible minhag. Avalmana said, what are we going to do? It's like a heavenly voice came out from heaven. It's like a voice came out of heaven that says, don't duchen. Every time a rabbi tried to duchen, something went wrong. So we said the Gra tried, he was taken to jail. His student Reb Chaim Volozhin tried,
City bird.
I have to see you.
the shul burnt down. By the way, there's other stories. The Rebbe of the Chasam Sofer was a very unique and innovative individual. His name was Reb Natan Adler. And he also tried, and something happened to him. It's like every time someone tried, something happened along the way. But what do we see from this story? That there are certain minhagim of the Rama that they never liked. And they tried to change it. So maybe outside of Israel they were unsuccessful, but in Israel we were successful. And therefore, we did change it. And I think we learned from this shir something very fundamental. And that is that even though we've accepted the code of Jewish law because it's such a complete book, it has the Sephardic and the Ashkenazic customs all blended into one, which is all very, very nice. However, I have to be honest with everyone, brutally honest. Even though we've blended it into one, there are things in there that we personally have a problem with, especially Ashkenazim with the Rama. And therefore, when we came back to Israel and we were forming new communities, we basically followed the Rama, but there were very noticeable exceptions. And again, I don't accept the point of view that we became Sephardim, because if that would be the case, then we should become Sephardim totally. We didn't. It's just we picked and chose. And I believe we learned from this that we don't have to always follow the Rama. We can follow the Rama when we believe he's right. So it turns out that 82%, 83% of the time we do follow the Rama, but there's going to be noticeable differences. Finally, these notable differences have nothing to do with Israel. People say, in Israel they duchen every day because it's holy. But outside of Israel it's not holy. They don't, what do you mean holy? The Torah doesn't talk about it being holy here or not here. In general, we didn't like the minhag. They had the power outside of Israel. We saw the Gra, Reb Chaim Volozhin, tried to change it, right? At the end of the day, I think that we don't pasken like the Rama always in Israel because there's certain things we didn't like, and because of which we basically came along and said, when we come back to Israel and form new communities, we are going to change it. Yes?
There are Ashkenazi communities in the States that I've seen that do say Hallel first night of Pesach.
Yes.
And there's always one or two people who ostentatiously get up and
leave.
Before.
You got it. But in Israel, it seems like it's a global minhag and everyone stays. I have to admit that I've seen that.
Yes.
I also will tell you that one of the people that encouraged it was Rav Soloveitchik. And because Rav Soloveitchik encouraged it so much, so many communities have done it. Because many of them are the students or the students' of Rav Soloveitchik.
Which did he encourage?
Saying Hallel.
Yeah.
His grandfather liked it. His uncle didn't, but his grandfather liked it. Apparently it was a brisker minhag. So he basically said to say it with a bracha. And even though the briskers are always worried about every chumrah in the book and out of the books, somehow this they went with. But you're 100% correct. There's many shuls that have incorporated it, and there's always people that get mad and walk out. Right? I can tell you a little story about that. I was once in Greece for Pesach with a group from Antwerp. That was my group. It was many people, so we had two rabbis. The group I was put with were people from Antwerp. Now, I didn't know Antwerp from a hole in the head at the time. So, being a little trained, I asked, well, let's do a vote. How many people have a minhag here to say Hallel and Shul on the night of Pesach, and how many not? And one guy looked at me and says, the Rebbe is zu bist a Meshigene? Is the rabbi a nutcase? What do you mean not to say Hallel? Of course you say Hallel! They're all Hasidim, they all say Hallel, so we said Hallel.